You're listening to Travel Tales with Fergal.
Hi, my name is Fergal O'Keefe and you're very welcome to the podcast. As you can imagine, I've many places on my travel bucket list, and I finally got to go to Granada in Andalucía in southern Spain this month, a city which was at the very top of that bucket list. Granada did not disappoint and I had very high expectations. I've always wanted to visit Granada to see the final capital of Moorish Spain and to learn about that region's ancient history from a Moorish perspective, which has had such a huge influence in European food, architecture, culture and science, just to name a few things. The most obvious example of that Moorish influence is the Alhambra, which looms over the city with the Sierra Nevada mountains in the background, often snow-capped. The Alhambra, it's a huge Middle Eastern style complex overlooking the city, which encompasses forts, royal palaces, serene gardens, fountains and pools. It is the most magical use of light, water, space, with symmetry and maths at its design core. Granada is a student town, so it's always buzzing day or night. Its medieval, narrow streets are amplified by the constant chorus of joyous revellers as they move from cafe to bar to partake in the city's wonderful, world-famous tapas tradition. The Moorish influence is most obvious in the flamenco shows in the old caves overlooking the Alhambra. The shows are full of passion and intensity and are a perfect reflection of the city's great Moorish tradition and heritage. A heritage that is still vibrant today and something that makes the city unique in Europe. A city I would definitely love to return to learn more about its culture and history. For more information on Granada, go to tourgranada.es, but also check my bio for more details. Now you can hear an interview I did on Clare FM where I give my top tips for Granada and the areas around the city. I hope you enjoy it.
It is time for Travel Tales with Fergal, who I suspect, like myself, is someone who knows the joys of writing and receiving a letter. Good morning to you, Fergal.
Good morning. And if I was entering that competition, I think it would have been the place that we're going to talk about today was going to this place, because I've always wanted to go here, Granada in Andalucía in Spain. It's always been on my bucket list. Particularly, I remember being in school and reading about the Alhambra, which is it would considered one of the seven wonders of the Muslim world. So it's somewhere I've always wanted to go. So about 2 weeks ago, I finally got to go there, and it didn't disappoint. You know, when you've built something up all your life, would it live up to it? And it sure did. Like, absolutely amazing, beautiful, atmospheric palace and city. Something
tells me, Fergal, your bucket list has more ticks on it than most people's. I think you're probably completed most of your bucket list. But why was Granada and Andalucía in general on your bucket list, and how did it come about that you finally got there in the last week or two?
Yeah, so it's always been on my bucket list, and particularly, I suppose I've said it many times here, I love history. Growing up with my Auntie Anne, who used to be a history teacher in the Cloister, and so I've always loved history. And this time last year, I was talking to you about being on the Camino. I love the walking and the nature, but I really loved on the Camino was the history. I kind of got the Reconquista side of the story, the Spanish Kings side up there. Was all about pushing back the Moors and bringing Spain back to the Christians and the kings. And then I really wanted to see the Moorish side of the story. So Granada, that was the old final capital of the Moorish kings of Spain. So you really get that, Moorish, Muslim, Arabic history in the city. I guess that you'd feel it there, but gosh, you really, even more like with the culture, with the food, with the architecture, everything. So I'm really interested in that sort of history. So that I would go is probably the best place in Spain to get that. So really spectacular. I flew into Malaga And I think it's about an hour and a half, but it's a beautiful drive up through the mountains, through all fields of olive fields, and then slowly into the mountains. You Granada is in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, so it's such a beautiful setting because you've got the mountains around you. You've got it's based like it's surrounded by the mountains, and there even now there was snow on the mountains, so it's gorgeous. And the really cool thing about Granada is that it's population of about 300,000, but it's a student town. So what's really cool about it is that it's somewhere that you can go all year. I love going to student cities because even in winter, they're full of life. So, I mean, population is 300,000, but there's 60,000 students. So I think it's 1 in 5 are actually students, and they all live around the center of the town. So that gives the town its life, which makes it, it's always buzzing. And it's the thing about Granada, I talked about the architecture. It's got that old, like you'd see in, say, Morocco, in Marrakesh. It's got all these narrow streets and little shops, which is that Arabic style, and it just is buzzing. Really, really spectacular. Like all day, at nighttime, there's always people around. Everybody. What Granada is famous for is its the tapa bar culture, and they still have that where it's free tapas. So if you get a beer, you get a free tapa. So it's really cool. And in the student town, the students can live off their tapas. What it means is that people are always out eating in the streets because it's so cheap. It's cheaper nearly to just get a beer rather than be at home cooking dinner. So the place is buzzing. I mean, as I said, it's a university town since I think it's 1525. So it's a long time old university town. So it's got that old Moorish Arabic history. Then when it was taken over in 1492. And then, it's got that Spanish architecture and lovely Renaissance churches and buildings as well. So it's got that feel. But I have to say, what's really strong is that Moorish culture. It is, you can see it in the people. You can see it with the food. I said about, the Moors, all Andalusia was the last area of the Moors. And even on my way up, I actually went kind of the seaside area. Like famously, they talk about Granada because of the mountains. It's not too, Irish people don't really know about it, but actually there's lots of skiing there in the mountains, and they actually have like over 100 kilometers of ski runs. And in April, a guy was telling me they called it like Bikini Day, where people actually go up in their shorts and bikinis and they ski in April, the last runs of the day. And then you can go down to the sea, which is, part of the Granada province is down. It's called the Costa Tropicana. And everyone knows the Costa del Sol. But the Costa Tropicana, actually, when I arrived there, I first went to the Costa Tropicana and it was really gorgeous there, actually, I have to say. I went for a place. I went to this little town, and it's called Herradura, which is Horseshoe Bay, and it's surrounded by mountains and a little horseshoe bay, and had lunch in a beach bar there. And it's really cool little spot that is quite close to the Costa del Sol, to Malaga, that not too many Irish go to, but it's a really cool area. But it's kind of the beach area of the Granada province. And then I went up into Granada itself, and even when you're arriving into the town and you can see the Alhambra in the distance, and you always see that when you're going around the city, you see this old ancient fort, which would be, as I said, it's like one of the wonders of the world, really is. So it really is like an atmospheric place, I have to say.
It seems, Fergal, that those kind of places where there's a mixture of cultures and styles are some of the most interesting places to go. Like if you go to Turkey and you're getting that mixture of Asian, Muslim and European cultures, and again, down to historic reasons, Granada and Andalucía, that those cultures and, food and everything else that goes along with it, music, it all mixes together over the centuries as well then.
Yeah, and it's, you're so aware of it. It's funny because I was talking to different people, and I kept going, isn't the Arab influence here very strong? And, they were saying to me, no, the Arabs, they were all gone since 1500 or whatever. But I could see it. It's still, even in their look, that it's so strong. And it's quite amazing. Like even the flamenco, which is something that I have to say that, I did the flamenco, and an area in Granada, they're caves. So they're these like caves in the hills. And since the 1500s, the Arabs and the gypsies, they say the gypsies came from India, but they actually lived in those caves, and now a lot of the caves, there's like they do flamenco dancing at nighttime, and they have restaurants, and it's really atmospheric because you go into these little caves where there's flamenco area. And I thought it'd be a bit like sometimes you go to those Irish shows, with the dancing and stuff, and it can be a little bit twee, but this was quite amazing. I couldn't believe it because when you go into the flamenco, it's so intense, and they just go straight into it. When it starts, it was like an hour show, but it was just straight in, and like the power and the intensity of it was quite amazing. And then the music was, I would go very like Moroccan, and the singing sounded like that, like call to prayer. That's actually what the music sounded like. So the Arabic influence was so strong, but I would so recommend that anyone, if they go to Granada or anywhere like that, to do flamenco. And just, I've mentioned a few things, and I will mention now as we're talking, but on my Instagram, I'll put up links to the different things that I was on that I would recommend, and people can see it there, Travel Tales with Fergal, because I have lots of recommendations for people to see like that. Like, I would really recommend to do that, to do the flamenco. Another thing that I did was a walking tour around Granada, which, a very famous writer, Lorca, who, he's like the Shakespeare or the W.B. Yeats of Spanish literature, and he's one of the most famous writers in Spanish history. He was a poet and a playwright, and he died during the Spanish Civil War, but he was from Granada. So I did this walking tour of the town, but it's actually, you're learning about Lorca, and there was people doing little actors would pop up around the tour, but really it was a great way of getting around the town, getting to learn about the history of Granada. You're brought into the university where he was, and brought to the last place where he was before he was killed during the Civil War. So you're learning about the Civil War, etc. So that's a really good thing to get a feel for the town. Any of those walking tours now, I'd always recommend. But that was the big thing, is the Alhambra. And that's the thing that, I've always wanted to see. And that really didn't disappoint. I mean, I was there for 3 hours, and I had to zip through it. I didn't even get to see as much, all of it. So I definitely would like to go back. I would say you could spend the whole day there. It's a big, ancient, palace. It was originally a fort, then it became a palace. And the last Moorish kings, the Nasrid family, the dynasty, they were the last Moorish kings of all Spain, Andalucía, and eventually, so that was from like the 1200s to 1492 when Isabel and Ferdinand took it over. But it was kept intact. So you've got this unbelievable building like that you would imagine you would see somewhere like in Morocco with, it's got the symmetry, it's got the fountains, got beautiful wooden ceilings, and, very intricate tiles, this Muslim architecture that is quite just unbelievable. Like I kind of zipped through it. I was getting the history. I would really recommend. I had a great guy called Manu, who I'll put up a link with, and I would recommend getting a guide actually, because you really need to learn the history of the place. But also, just a little tip, like it's so popular. This is one of the most popular places to visit in the world. So one, you have to pre-book it to make sure you do that. You can't just arrive up there. But also, if you get a guide to bring you through it, you skip the queues because the group queues are much smaller. So I really recommend people to see that. And when you're in the Alhambra, it's amazing. But I would actually go, what's more amazing about it is when you're looking up at the Alhambra. So there's different, a great place to see that. Then is if you're, it's called Mirador San Nicolas. So basically the old Arabic region is called Albasan neighborhood. That's a lovely place at nighttime so I would really recommend people go there. There's restaurants there. You can watch the sun going down over the Alhambra and watch this big, huge fort, which is so stunning, I have to say. I'll put some photos up on my Instagram so people can see what it looks like. But gosh, it really was one of the most amazing places I've ever seen.
Fergal, you mentioned it wouldn't be one of those kind of typical places in Spain that a lot of Irish go, or that you might see a lot of British people. What was it busy as a tourist destination regardless? Is it a bit of a hidden gem that there's some tourists, or is it quite busy? I know you mentioned there were queues there of tourists as well.
Yeah, so I suppose the Alhambra is so busy you'd have to pre-book it, and actually there's a hotel there, a Parador, in the Alhambra, which Parador is a great. I would always recommend people, if they wanted to stay somewhere very special, the Parador range. They're Spanish government-owned hotels often in old castles and places like that around Spain. And there's a very famous one in the Parador. So if you stay there, you could be the first person to go there. But, even when I was there, yeah, you would definitely, if you're going to Granada, you would definitely pre-book when you're going. And I went there in the afternoon, but I'd recommend people to go in the morning to get the whole day. But otherwise, throughout the town, I always say, I've said this before, like I like to go to places, you don't want to go somewhere where there's no tourists, because tourists mean that on a Monday, Tuesday, or every day of the week, the place is always buzzing. And the other thing is that when it's a student town, it's always buzzing. And I noticed that at nighttime, like that, the tapa culture. Another thing I did was the tapa tour, just went around and, I would recommend again people to do that, because people just go from bar to bar and these unbelievable tapas that you have, and they're actually free. You just have a beer and you just move from bar to bar. And it's gas watching all the young people, because they're all, even at 12 at night, they're sitting in the bar and they all have food around the table with them as they're having beers. But because of the students, the town is always buzzing, but it's not too packed, I would say during the summer would be peak season, but and also would be very hot during the summer. So, we talked about places to go in the autumn or even in winter. I would really recommend this, because it would be particularly, even in winter, like after Christmas, you'd see the mountains, snow-covered mountains off in the distance. So that would be really recommended. And then all around Granada, there's again, Granada is on the tourist trap. A lot of people go to Malaga, and I would recommend, even if you went to Malaga or you were somewhere around there, it's an hour and a half, but you can do day trips up to see the Alhambra. It really is worth it. But also all around that area, the Granada region, that's somewhere that I'd never been to before. So that really opened up my eyes, because I went to a place near Granada, which is a desert. That's the Graffy Desert, and I didn't know anything about it. It's a geopark, and it actually looks like the Grand Canyon. So I went on a kind of a cycling trip through there, and it's exactly like the Grand Canyon, and it just in the desert with the snow-capped mountains in the distance. And I actually passed this place. It's called Casa de la Desert, and it's in the middle. Imagine you're in the middle. It's on the edge of the canyon, and it's this little glass block, where very famous, where people can stay. You can book it. So if you really wanted to stay in the middle of this, I'd say it's amazing at nighttime. But that's somewhere that people, I took photos of it and put up a link. But just going through that desert, and then the towns around that area, I talked about the caves and all the towns around there. It's a bit like, Matera in Italy, in the Puglia region. The last James Bond movie, I think the opening sequence went through this town, Matera, where there's loads of these cliff houses. And again, all the towns in this region in the desert, they all have they're like cave towns. So you can actually stay. I stayed in a cave hotel, which is a bit of fun, and people can do that, but there's all the towns around there. I went to a place called Cadix, which, if you really want to go off the beaten track, it was like a really cool town where there was like the cave houses. There was an old fort, like a smaller version of the Alhambra, like an old Arabic Medina. It had an amazing, huge church in the town. It had Roman ruins and a beautiful old square in the centre of town with loads of restaurants, which would be really cool at nighttime. Now, that's really off the beaten track, but I'd say that place, again, I'll put up information on it, because I think if you wanted to go somewhere a little bit different, I would really recommend there. And another place that I really just want to mention is the place called Montefrio, which is, if you wanted to paint, like if someone was painting the classic Andalusian town, this is whitewashed. This town, it was voted by National Geographic as the most picturesque town in Spain. Is this hilltop Spanish town with at the very top of the cliff, there's an old church at the top, really cool restaurants. I went for great food there. I'll put up the name of that restaurant because it was near the church and it was really cool. But there's these gorgeous old whitewashed towns. So, a lot of people, when they go to Spain, they stay on the coast. And then just off the coast, there are these amazing hill towns, amazing desert, for people to see, that are completely different than anything else around that area. And, because you're off the beaten track, like you're treated really well. Like everyone was very interested to see how we end up there and asking questions. So I couldn't recommend it enough.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. And in terms of cost to get there and ease of access in terms of flights and so on, Fergal, what way or what route or what airlines would you recommend people to go with if they want to visit Granada or Andalucía?
Yeah, so that's the beauty of it. Malaga, like, I mean, even when I was flying home on the Sunday, there was there was a Ryanair flight and an Aer Lingus flight roughly around the same time. So Ryanair and Lingus, they fly every day to Malaga. It's one of the most popular destinations for Irish tourists who then stay on the coast. So, that's the great thing. So, and because there's so many flights, they're very reasonably priced. So, I would, to do that, like, I've been to Seville, and I don't know if we've talked about it. I definitely have to talk about that because I just love that Andalusian style. So if I was picking the perfect trip, you could fly into Seville as well, and you could do Seville, Cordoba, which I haven't been to yet, and Granada. And I think that would be the ultimate road trip. If you wanted to do an amazing road trip, you would do Seville, Cordoba, Granada, and you could go to Ronda and down and fly out of Malaga. And that would be an amazing trip if you wanted to do like a week trip. And I recommend to people, if you want to get a feel for Granada, a guy I've talked about before, Anthony Bourdain, he did an episode of No Reservations. It's on YouTube on Granada. And his director of photography had married a girl from Granada. So he was just going around the town, doing the tapa tours. And it was during Easter time, which would be a great time to see Granada because it's a big thing around that region, the Easter processions, etc. But if you want to get a feel for the place, I would recommend that episode. Brilliant
stuff, Fergal. Glad you enjoyed the trip. And I must say, listeners, he's got a fantastic tan. So the weather was obviously very, very good. Fergal, thanks as ever. And we'll chat to you again soon on Travel Tales with Fergal.
Thanks, Alan, for a great interview, and I hope that shows my love for Granada and Andalusia, and I'm definitely going to go back to Granada. I really need to spend more time seeing the Alhambra and just, having time to just sit back and enjoy the city. So we have another couple of episodes coming up over the next few weeks, so please keep an eye out for that. Safe travels, take care. I would ask if you could please subscribe to Apple Podcast so a new episode will appear in your library every week. I would also really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. To find out who's on every Tuesday, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Tales with Fergal. Stay safe and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.